everyone, welcome back to Dragalia Lost. So we are here with the first Agito guide of the New Year's, featuring of course one of the newest characters in the game, which is of course Yoshitsune. She's a Zodiac, a character from the New Year's events, and she represents the Rooster Wind clan. She also has two forms in the lore, the old form, which is her canonical form, and then her young form, which she takes during battle. I really love the design of both forms, and I'm happy to play the young one, even if many probably wanted the old one. So here we are, and hopefully she will do a decent enough showcase for the Agito of Water. Some things about Yoshitsune: she's what I call a high skill ceiling hero. What does this mean? Basically, you need to play her very well to perform at her best. If you play her in an average way, you won't get the most out of her kit, and she may end up feel a little bit weaker. But I can assure you that she's not. She's actually a very strong DPS if you manage to use her in the correct way. Of course, saying the correct way is kinda strange, because actually she very much depends on how the boss is made. If the boss has a lot of dodgeable abilities, she gets very strong. If the boss has a lot of purple circles, as I like to call them, unavoidable abilities, she may perform a little bit worse. She's also the first close range mana caster to join the game, apart from the ones in the Battle Royale. And the close range mana caster are mana casters that act like a shotgun. If you ever played an FPS in general, you know that shotguns perform better when you are close to the enemy. This holds true in this game as well, and later on we will see why in the battle against the Agito. As usual, the showcase will follow the pattern that I did the 20 last time that we did this in the last year. So we start with the battle, then we go into the adventure analysis, the build that I made for her, and other stuff. And then from there it is over, of course. You don't need infinite content for a guide. As usual, guys, remember that my guides aren't optimal. They are just me studying the hero and trying to see what best comes out of their kit and how you can improve or at least understand better the hero in this particular fight. As we go further into the New Year's, we will also get a new boss, so those guides will kinda get, I won't say outdated, but remember that they are in this present timeline working with the current hardest bosses in the game. So if you are watching in March, remember that. But now, let's focus for Yoshitsune, and let's jump into the battle and see what she can do and my tips during the Agito battle itself. So, let's get straight into it. Let's see what Yoshi can do in this Agito. So the first thing that you need to know is that she has a few things that you need to accomplish to bring out the real damage. The first thing that is easier to accomplish in the first phase of this fight is to dodge abilities. Every time she dodges, she gains 10% strength from her co-ability and also from her passive 10% extra attack rate for 30 seconds. Of course, if you manage to dodge with her S1, even better, but as you will see right here, I started doing an S1 and then my allies freeze the enemy, so I suggest this to you. Remember every time that you have a freeze ally in your team to save up the S1 for whenever the twins do this series of attacks that you see on screen, so the circle attack plus the combos from the black-haired twin. However, be careful, because getting hit from the black-haired twins means that you can get burned very easy, and that could lead to your death. Enough of that, let's get straight into the Agito phase, since there isn't much else to say about this. Yoshitsune is a close range mana caster. That means that she deals the most damage whenever she's close to the enemy, and as you can see, that holds true here as well, since I am every time near the boss. This means, however, that you need to be careful about all of her close range abilities, such as you can see right here, the dash, which I dodge very well. But one thing that I have to say: the S1 is one of her main source of damage whenever you parry. However, the main source of damage of the S1 is the first attack, the one that she does a little spin, and that is hard to land against this boss whenever she's in the Agito phase, because she dashes. So what you want to do is that you want to be at the end of the dash, so that the first attack of the spin every time hits. The second thing that you need to know is that this lasts 30 seconds, the buff that you get from the S1, so try to refresh it every 30 seconds, because it is essential for your damage. Yoshitsune damage comes mainly from her normal attacks. I'd say I drank the S1 with the dodge, normal attacks, and then S1. The S2, while it is not a bad ability, it kinda takes out of her main DPS because it should be used whenever you are against multiple enemies. So for example, in phase 1, if you can land it on both twins, it performs very well. Another thing that you need to know, Yoshitsune has a very low amount of HP, much like Lapis and Pinon before her, so remember that you want to prioritize survivability over damage whenever you can. Try to use the defensive ability from the Agito weapon whenever you can, or the healing skill share if you have one. For example, I gave her one since I found an hard time surviving some of the times where the boss is pushed, as you see right here. However, if you manage to clear the conditions for the attack rate buff, for the survivability, and also for the overall damage that you get from the normal attacks, Yoshitsune should be very easy to handle, and she will deal a crazy amount of damage, as you saw in the first phase of this fight. In the second phase, it mainly relies on you hitting all the dodges in the red circles, spins, and dashes that she does, since those are the only two abilities that you can dodge reliably. The other ones are kinda hard to do. But here we are, the fight is over. Hopefully you guys saw a little bit of how she works and how good she is, since we had two of hers, and this will convince you to try her out in the Agito. But now let's go into a little bit more in-depth analysis into the adventurer analysis and of course my build itself. Since we had another Yoshitsune, I also took a glance at her build and will also explain what she did. So let's get into it. Alright, it's time for my favorite part of the video. It's time to analyze Yoshitsune and then move on to my build and see the choices of Wyrmprints, abilities and skill shares that I made. Of course, there are some things to be considered. The first thing is that she's the first close range mana caster, so the analyzation of her kit will go a little bit more in depth. Yoshitsune is quite the interesting adventurer for sure, because she's both her first close range mana caster, but also one that relies on quite the high skill ceiling gimmick with all her dodging and stuff. One thing that I want to say before we move further into this discussion is the fact that close range mana caster require you to stay close to the enemy, much like a melee unit, which is why I consider her sort of a melee unit in itself, even though of course she can steal it from range, for example much like Galalaxy. But unlike Galalaxy, if you hit with ranged attacks with this Yoshitsune, you will deal less damage. Why? Because her attack is a spread shot in a cone direction. I think it is 7 hits, and if you don't hit all of those 7 hits, you will deal less damage. If you hit all 7, however, you will deal more damage than a normal attack from another unit, which is why her normal attacks are probably her best source of DPS overall, which is why you also want to power up both her crit rate, damage, and of course standard attack damage. That should be your aim for any kind of build that you make around Yoshitsune. So yes, Tiki is very good for her, if you didn't get it from this explanation. One other thing that I have to say is that the screen gets flooded with numbers whenever you use this type of unit, because there are a ton of hits, so that means that you will get a ton of numbers show up on the screen. While it is pleasing, for sure, I love the feeling, it is also kind of a mess whenever you have to look at what is happening, so that can be kind of a turn off. Also, on the art itself, we can see the wave, I think, of Okusai painting, so that's kind of an easter egg, and also the bots that I think are a callback to Daunora. If you don't know, Yoshitsune is also known as Ushiwagamaru, so if you played Fate, now you might get the citation right here. If you don't, you play Fate, because it is quite a good game. Now, let's jump into the analyzation of the skills, since it is probably the most interesting part of her kit, at least the first skill. The second one is quite bland, if I'm honest with you guys. So we have Kumasaga Flash, begins preparing a powerful shot, which means that she will stay 3 to 4 seconds still, she won't move or do anything. However, if the enemy is hit her, she will do something, we'll see later what it is. After which, this skill will deal water damage to enemies directly ahead. If, while preparing this shot, the user is hit by an attack that can be avoided, which are the red attacks. Red attacks are the ones that spawn a red circle or a red prompt on the ground, which means that you can dodge them if you use a skill or if you roll at the right time. So I suggest that every time you can, you use the S1 to dodge. For one main reason. The first hit from a dodged S1, which is the little spin that you saw in the battle, deals a crazy amount of damage, up to 10k damage with a single hit. and overall it is probably her best source of immediate damage compared to the normal attacks. So the rotation for Yoshitsune should be like this: the S1 with a guaranteed dodge, then the normal attacks with the buff, the S1 without the dodge, the normal attacks without the buff, and then the S2. We will see why in a second. So if you get the dodge, the user will get a damage immunity provided by skills as usual, and also deal water damage to surrounding enemies for 30 seconds and increase the user attack rate by 15%, which is why you want to get the dodge on this S1. 15% extra attack rate for 30 seconds is crazy, especially with their powerful normal attacks, especially with the fact that it lasts quite a long time. So you get the idea, you want to hit this as fast as you can, get the buff, start doing amazing damage with the normal attacks. That's the most of her kit. Her second ability, however, is Shanao Strike. Deals water damage to the target and nearby enemies. So this ability is kind of a letdown for two reasons. First, it seems like this should have gotten an affliction. In my opinion, I was about to say IMO, it is a Frostbite that should be here, because it makes a lot of sense, at least to me, to have a Frostbite tied to a gun rather than Bog or Freeze. And also because it doesn't deal quite the good amount of damage that I hoped. So when would you use a Shanao Strike? In the Agito in particular, whenever the two bosses are stacked together and you want to keep up the combo, or at least deal damage, and you aren't able to stay close to the enemy. Since this is a sort of ranged ability, that's the main work that it will do. So it's not completely useless, but it is also kind of a letdown because the damage modifiers are quite low. Now, I will repeat because it can be kinda difficult to understand. The main way to deal damage with Yoshitsune is getting the buff, so the first thing you want to do is the S1 with the dodge, then you have normal attacks with the buff, then you have the S1, and then you have the normal attacks without the buff. So it's not completely useless to use the S1 whenever you can't dodge, but I don't recommend it, because the main damage of the S1 comes from the dodge first attack that you do. That one has a 1000% modifier, which makes sense, because it is kinda hard to land, and it should be your first priority. This is one of the reasons for why she is such a high skill ceiling adventurer, so I hope that you manage to train yourself into the ways of Yoshitsune to see if you manage to land the Kumosaka Flash much easier than I did in all my tries that I did in the last days to make the guide. Now, we move on to the abilities and the passives, which of course are the second part of her skill set. The abilities are the Manacaster ability, the Ghost Accelerator, and then a new chain ability, dodge equals strength plus 10%. So whenever you dodge, both in roll or with the skill, you also get 10% plus strength, both for yourself or if your allies do it. This is actually very good, because you will dodge a lot with Yoshitsune if you want to use her at her best, and also because 10% is actually a very good amount to get from this type of abilities. So overall, she's not even bad in the backline if you want to use her, since most of the time you will be dodging anyway with other adventurers. Not as much as with Yoshitsune, but still a moderate amount. Now, for the passives, there is a clarification that I have to do. In the analysis of the gacha, I expected that the buff from Nimble Riposte stacked with the buff from the S1. Apparently they do not. I don't think it is intended, or I hope that it's not intended, because otherwise it will be kind of a letdown, because she needs this buff to be as good as she can get. So if it gets fixed, I'm happy. If it doesn't, know that I made an honest mistake there, because I actually expected that they would have stacked. But what does a Nimble Riposte 2 do? So dodging will carry out an additional attack towards the target. This is the Ilia passive. It works very very well, especially in a fight so mobile such as Ayaha and Otoha. And in addition, dodging an enemy attack will increase the user attack rate by 10% for 30 seconds. This does not stack with the S1 buff, so we'll only get the best buff, which is of course the one from the S1. However, I will say this. The S1 can be difficult to land, and sometimes maybe you don't have it ready, and you want to get the buff anyway. And a simple roll will get you 10% attack rate for 30 seconds. It's not too bad. However, if this stacked with the S1, it will be even more amazing, especially with the fact that they gave such a letdown of an S2 and average damage in the S1 without the dodge. So hopefully in the future we see this changed. Overall, what you want to do, keep up the flurry hit count with the dodge, and also remember to use the attack rate buff whenever you can. You don't want to stay 1 second without the attack rate buff. Always have it. Be it the less powerful version from the passive or the strong version from the S1. Then we have Stun Res, which means that you have to stay on the white-haired twin and be careful of the black one, because burn can kill you very easily. Burn, if you get burned with Yoshitsune, you're dead, basically. I will tell you this. Happened to me a couple of times, I just understood that I was dead. And then we have Flurry Strength plus 20%. Increase Strength by 20% when the combo count is 15 or higher. So, whenever you have Flurry as a passive, it means that you need to have a Flurry on the Wyrmprints as well, because otherwise you would miss on extra damage that you need to achieve anyway. So for her, Flurry actually is very easy to get, because you just need to shoot 2 times with her normal attacks and you should be already near the Flurry range to get the buff. So overall quite easy to get, and also quite good adventure to get Flurry on. One last thing before we get into my build. Yoshitsune normal attacks will move you. They will move you slightly behind you, so be careful whenever you do the normal attacks, because you will end up in some weird attacks from the enemy without you wanting to be there. It happened to me sometimes, so I will tell you this. Be careful whenever you do normal attacks. They will put you at, sometimes at least, in a weird spot. Okay, my overall opinion on Yoshitsune is that she is good, quite the powerful DPS, but she has such a nice skilling compared to other adventurers that maybe you would prefer to go for something else. However, I myself like adventurers with a high skill ceiling, so I can say that I love her, and I will probably use her a lot more after this video, since I already built the Agito Manacaster, so there it is. But now, let's get into the analysis of this adventurer, or rather my build, not the adventurer itself, and see what I came up with. One thing that I have to say, I saw a build of another Yoshitsune, which spurred me to add her to the consideration of my Wyrmprints, but I will tell you what it is in a second. First, let's see the Wyrmprints that I decided to get for her. So the first one, to the surprise of no one, is a skill damage Wyrmprint. We still don't have the skill damage Wyrmprint for Manacaster, so I went for Resounding Rendition. Overall, you always want to get this, because the S1 still does a crazy amount of damage with the dodge, and adding more damage to that isn't a bad choice overall. Then we have, of course, Flurry Strength. This is a given because she has a Flurry in her kit. I always prefer to get Memory of a Friend, since it is the best one out of all the Flurry Wyrmprints, but any can go this time because you don't really need to achieve the Wyrmprint bonus in this case. And then we have a third choice, which is actually a free spot. You can go with anything you want here, but I suggest to go for crit damage like I did. We have Seaside Princess, one of my favorite art for the summer Wyrmprints, which features Shell, and damn, the fact that we cannot roll on Gala Shell kinda makes me mad, because I would love to get her. This gives you crit damage plus 20%, so overall a good amount of increase in damage whenever you crit, which will be a lot with her kit, because you have the special Manacaster Wyrmprint, which is Enter the Blue Rose, another very good looking Wyrmprint right here. Only for Manacasters, gives you critical rate plus 12%, and we cannot say that that is bad. It is actually quite good, especially when you pair it up with Dragon Yule Chan like I did. Last but not least, another free spot. I decided to go with his clever brother, because most of the time Frostbite will be on the enemy at all times. You could go for the other Manacaster Wyrmprint, which gives her crit damage, and replace this one with something else. I saw some players run the Feline double buff Wyrmprint, the one that boosts crit, but I honestly think that relies a little bit too much on the buff that you receive from other players' skill shares, so I don't like it way too much as intended. I'd say that if you get an HP plus Wyrmprint on Yoshitsune, it would be not a bad idea, because it improves her survivability, which is probably one of the main reasons of her weaknesses in the fight itself. Overall, two things that you want to achieve with the Wyrmprint build. The first thing is damage, so flurry and skill damage should always be there. The second thing is crit. So crit, you need to get crit rate first and crit damage second. And I say that with this setup, you won't miss anything at all. However, if you want to aim for more crit damage, you can also go for a dragon that goes into crit damage. I went for crit rate, which is another decision, because I feel like if you crit more, you deal more damage. If you do more crit damage, you deal overall more damage, but it is probably tied a little bit more to RNG than with more crit rate, if you understand the logic behind my decision right here. Let me know your own Wyrmprint builds for Yoshitsune, since of course she's a new character, so I look forward to your own decisions. Now, for dragons, another very interesting discussion to be have here. I don't have a Gala Poseidon, which will be the best option for Yoshitsune, since she wants raw damage overall, since her main source of damage is the standard attacks, so the best way to boost standard attacks is of course extra strength. If you do not have the Gala Poseidon like I do, however, there are some very good options. So the first option of course will be Leviathan, because Leviathan is raw strength, and you wouldn't be wrong there, Leviathan is quite good. However, if you want to specialize Yoshitsune a little bit more like I did, I suggest Dragon Yulchan. So, most of the time I always run with Dragon Yulchan, you guys know me by now, but I feel like in this time is actually very relevant for one reason. You get a boost of crit rate by a relevant amount of 20%, and that really helps. If you saw, or if you see the fight again against the Agito, you will see that I critted a whole lot more than usual, and that is one of the main reasons. And the crit on the S1 with the dodge dealt 20k of damage, 10k for one queen, 10k for the other. And that's a crazy good amount of damage for one skill. So you can see why I went for crit rate compared to raw strength. Of course, this means that Gala Poseidon is still better compared to this. And another option that I will present to you is of course Nimis, because I talk about the critical damage dragon, and that is this guy. So, what would I rank them? I will say Gala Poseidon, then Dragon Yulchan / Nimis, depending on what you prefer, and then of course Leviathan. Those are my three options. Gaibne and Kraidne are not that good on this adventurer, because you don't really need to recharge your skills, since most of the time you will actually use only your S1, or even not that at all if you cannot dodge. Other dragons are not really that good overall, so I'd say, once again, Gala Poseidon, Dragon Yulchan, Nimis, and then Leviathan. For weapon, go with the Agito, you can't go wrong there. You actually want to upgrade it to get the Kushimitama effect, which adds more time for your combos. And of course, the HP restore, which helps with her survivability, which she needs. The buff itself is quite decent, since you get more crit rate, and also more strength and defense whenever you switch, which actually helps with the survivability, so quite a good weapon for her. Now the interesting part of the video, which brings me to the skill set that I saw. Let's start with them actually. So the first one is, as usual, the weapon. I don't suggest switching from the weapon, since it is very good and easy to recharge. The second one, you have many options. The first is Affliction, and should always be Affliction whenever you have the guarantee that you can survive. If you don't have it, don't go for Affliction and go for survivability like I did. Heals are good if you need them, and you do need them in this fight, because one purple circle in the Agito face can kill you very easily. So I went for the Galazena healing, which is one of the best one, especially with the fact that she leaves an health kit on the ground. But for Affliction we have the usual, Summer Celiera, Fjorm, Liri, etc. Then on second place I'd actually put not the healing, but another skill that I saw from another Yoshitsune, which is the US skill. So the US skill is actually very cool. It gives you a buff. This buff for 20 seconds raises your critical rate, and also your HP is restored by 3% of damage inflicted, but your defense is reduced by 40%. While this might seem bad, I saw this Yoshitsune basically heal up to full with only one normal attack. So it is very strong if you can guarantee pulling off a high skill level of play with Yoshitsune, which is why I want to recommend it, just because I saw this player use it and I felt like it was quite decent. Third option, of course, is survivability, so healing in general. You have, Dragonule Lily, not Santa Lily. Then you have Galazena and other healers that work very well. Fourth option include the buffer, so Elisan, Pasha, Summer Cleo, etc. And then last but not least, I will put the Galamim dragon ability here, since she gets a ton of use out of dragons to survive from purple circle attacks, but that's a remote, very remote idea. Next, we have the abilities. So right here you have the obvious choice of Tiki. This is the most obvious and should always be their choice. The second choice, which I actually made out of the main ability, is a lens character, and Elisan is the best one for one reason. All the other lens characters give you a frostbite chain ability, which Yoshitsune cannot inflict without a skill shot. So Eli works very well because she gives you HP and extra strength, which you cannot go bad with. Third choice is Dragonule Cleo, because we cannot put Gala Eli since we have the normal Eli, so we went with the other options that gives combo time and also crit rate, which works very well. If you guys count, I think we reached 50% crit rate from all the Wyrmprints, Dragon, abilities, etc. So you can see why my build is sort of a mixed crit build. Other options, of course, include to go for an axe character for the defense buff, which sometimes work a little bit better than the HP one. You also have one character for the skill damage and the blade characters for the raw strength. I will, as usual, post the names of the characters that I recommend on the left, because I cannot remember all of them, but this is the one that I preferred. Okay, quite the long showcase, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We will come back with the next Agito discussion. I'm not sure when, we will see probably at the end of this week or the start of the next one. I still need to decide the next character, since of course we won't be rolling for a while until the Persona Collapse comes out, but hopefully you enjoyed this one. Let me know your own builds and strategies for Yoshitsune. I will be happy to hear them a lot in the comments. For now guys, this has been it for the Yoshitsune Agito guide. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Remember to leave a like and a sub if you like the video, and of course your own suggestions overall for the video series, the character, etc. I very much love the Zodiacs, kinda sad that we didn't get Seimei, but at least we got the story thanks to Starshade. I wanted also to refresh my invite for you guys to try out new characters. While I was doing this video, I actually met about 10 to 15 groups of Karina players, which only played the Karina and quit because they couldn't use Karina. Then, when one player decided to join the lobby, he couldn't understand the fight and made us swipe countless times, so I had to train a Karina player to understand the fight. And that speaks a lot about why it is bad to have a character like Karina in the game, and why it is bad to use her. You need to understand the fight before you go to cheese them, because in the future, when you cannot cheese them, you will be worse, because you will need to go back, relearn the fight, and then go into Legendary to try it again. So, I leave you with this little story, but for today guys, this has been Lodge, Yoshitsune, and also the New Year guys, with probably the last video about them before the finale. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.